Okay, we'll call this council meeting to order at 6 p.m. I need a motion for adoption of minutes.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held at City Hall on Monday, January 8th, 2018 be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Draycott and seconded by Councillor Treger. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have two delegations this evening. The first delegation from Canada Inns Mixed Doubles committee presentation. So I'll ask the presenters to take the podium.
They never told me about the jackets.
Well, I was just going to say, nice jackets, you know.
I get in here and said, what are you guys doing?
Not the first time we let you out of things. Good evening. For you who don't know me, I'm Alan Dahl. I was the chair of the host committee for the mixed doubles. David Sattler and Trent Ward were my co-chairs. The only reason I'm a chair is because they appointed me to take any of the blame if things didn't go right. So, but things went wonderful. I'm proud to report to City of the success of the event. I think we put Portage la Prairie on the map. It was very, very successful, more than what we expected. The attendance was great, and we did make a little bit of profit too, which was nice. That helps out PRRA and the Portage Curling Club. It was also nice to see the new logo in the ice. I'm not sure if you caught any of it on TV. David's got a couple of numbers that we got from CBC.
Yeah, so one of the exciting things with the launch of Island on the Prairie's brand is when the city came on board for sponsorship, we deliberately looked at the city for on-ice advertisements, as everyone that is watching will be able to see that. So with the new logo, it was quite colorful. There were 4 games that were broadcast nationally on CBC. Everything else was streamed on cbc.ca. We don't have the streaming numbers in yet, but for the 4 games, over 1.3 million people watched the curling in Portage la Prairie. So that means 1.3 million different people saw the logo. The way the format of the game is, there's 10 rocks an end. We're estimating that logo was seen anywhere from 5 to 8 million times over 3 days. So here we are as the City of Portage, Stride Place, the Curling Group, and Pred as well, and tourism, being able to put that brand out there so that when people see it, they'll start to recognize that Portage Prairie is the island on the prairies. We do host these types of events, but the whole goal is to continue to host events like this and eventually drive them to our Island on the Prairies website so that people do start wondering, what is Island on the Prairies? And we're hoping to make it a vacation spot for many to come and check out.
I would like to take the opportunity to thank the City of Portage, the councillors who recognized the opportunity to kind of showcase our city, our facilities, Stride Place, and our spirit in our community. And we hope that you're going to be on board for our next adventures, because Curl Canada is after us already for bringing future events, Canadian championships to Portage la Prairie. They just liked it here. They loved the place. The ice makers loved the place. And it was, once again, a great facility. Just one other thing, because of the new branding we got, and I love the motto on it, but maybe we could add on Mixed Doubles Curling Capital of Canada. Trent, would you like to add anything?
No, this, it was a fantastic event. Our goal was to present the city as a place to bring curling events to Portage la Prairie. Of course, Curling Canada, again, as they say, they're knocking on our door. Our company signed a multi-year agreement with Curling Canada, and we have the chance to host 3 or 4 more events coming down the pipeline here, so we're hoping we can do that.
And on behalf of the host committee, we'd like to make a presentation to the mayor and say one of our volunteers' jackets that we got autographed for the bronze medalist, the silver medalist, and the gold medalist competitors.
Well, I'll put that on right now.
What size did you get?
Now, the larger the shoulders. You know, all week I was looking at, oops, help Grandpa. You were thinking, yeah?
You beat me to it, yes.
Senior helping senior.
Wow.
You got the right size, looks good.
And you are allowed to wear it out on the curling ice.
Really?
Yes.
Well-
To try out the mixed double.
Well, thank you very much.
And once again, thank you, councilors. See you next time around.
Well, there may be questions from the rest of council, but I just want to say, first of all, thank you three for coming out and presenting. But even more importantly, it was about a year ago last September when this first came on our radar, when Trent called me up and said, I'd like to bring Leo and Cindy out to talk to you about something. And it was really the folks from Canada Inn that first approached us about it. And during that phenomenal week, I talked to a lot of people, a lot of visitors, and they gushed about the facility, they gushed about the sponsors, the curling, but most of all, they talked about the people they met, and that would be Al's volunteers and all the people from Portage that were there, and it really did put us on the map. I think David's numbers indicated that we beat or tied the viewing for Hockey Night in Canada on the Friday night.
Yeah, CBC made a comment that the Friday night rivaled their Hockey Night in Canada average broadcast. So for a new sport that many Canadians, including people in Portage la Prairie, had no idea about, the viewership numbers were quite impressive.
Well, thank you very much for coming out and presenting this evening. Any questions or comments from council?
Nothing more to add, just to echo your comments, Your Worship. You guys did a fantastic job, and we're excited about what's the future holds for Portage and Region and hosting major events.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a second delegation this evening. Mr. Mike Vey from Aero Taxi is going to present.
How's it going?
Good evening, Mr. Vey.
Okay, I got a few things to talk about the taxi business in Portage. I've been involved in it with 20 years. The last few years been a bit of a struggle. I'm not here to pick a fight with you guys, but I definitely have issues with your bylaw enforcement. There's bylaws in place, they're not being enforced. People are being allowed to do whatever they want to do, and it's time to get it straightened out. So there's rules that are already written in the bylaw that aren't being enforced at any time. There hasn't been one single enforcement of the bylaw in at least 10 years. Drivers are driving around without licenses, they're driving around with the wrong insurance, they're picking people up more than one at a time. A lot of concerns. The new law that the government is putting out, vehicle for hire, states inside that article that when you hire a taxi, it's between you and the taxi driver, not show up with whoever's in the car already. So I'm hoping that's something that's going to be addressed. I talked today with Thompson Taxi, I talked with Steinbach Taxi, I talked with Winkler Taxi, Selkirk Taxi, the Paw Taxi, Flin Flon Taxi. There's no other place except maybe Brandon where this flat rate stuff is going on. Flat rate to me is a very dangerous thing. You got somebody going all the way across town for $5, so obviously the driver's got to drive a lot faster to try and make his money. And like I say, the bylaw as it's written right now hasn't been enforced at all. It states in the bylaw that the taxi driver is supposed to have his permit displayed at all times. The vehicle is supposed to be deckled and it's supposed to have prices on the vehicle at all times. None of that's going on. And it's time that that you got the bylaw set up so it's going to work. So I'm not sure if you got any questions.
Were there questions from council? Just make a quick comment, Mr. Vey. Currently, our livery bylaw is being reviewed, and actually, I'll let our chair of finance or head of finance speak to it a little bit of where that process is at.
Yeah, with the introduction of the Local Vehicles for Hire Act, we are in the process, and I think you know that.
Yeah.
We're in the process of rewriting entire bylaw. And we had actually sent out a survey to all existing taxi and shuttle drivers regarding that. Oh, don't press it. Oh, okay. And so we are planning on addressing a number of the concerns you have and also the concerns that we have. And our city manager has spoken to the RCMP, and in past the RCMP has been somewhat reluctant with more pressing matters to actually enforce the bylaw for us. And we're expecting that to change when we introduce the new bylaw in the next, well, probably in the next couple of months. So.
Okay. Well, I was called to a meeting in 2016.
Yeah.
I'm a city manager. It was very open that every single shuttle company in town is breaking the law. I had it all documented. I had it all lined up for him. He told us changes were going to be made. The only change that was made was he increased our fee 750%. So I don't know any other business in Portage that got hit for 750% increase. I'm in the only business in Portage that the city has to authorize me to hire somebody, which takes months to get a medical done, to get everything done. And yet these other guys, they do whatever they want.
Yeah, I can understand your frustration, and all I can say is we are making changes, and I can't really speak to what's happened in past. All I can speak to is in future what our intent is.
So
to
where
do.
would you get your advice from for these changes? Like, I'm not trying to be rude, but
Well, part of the
I've never seen
process,
you in a
Mr. Vey,
taxi.
is that there's a survey that's going to be conducted.
I did the survey.
Well, that's where the information is going to
It's
come
like Mickey
from.
Mouse.
Well, that might be your opinion, but that's the process.
I've been in the business for 20 years. There's nothing I don't know about it. So when you send me a survey about bylaws and changing the bylaw, when you're not enforcing the bylaw already, what difference does it make what changes you make?
Okay, well, thank you for your sharing that information with us, Mr. Vey. Appreciate it.
You have a nice night.
Thank you. There are no hearings this evening, so we're going to move into Finance, Legislative, and Property Committee. Councillor Buds.
Thank you. A couple items on the agenda here tonight. First being our audit service plan. There is really no changes to this. This is a typical document that we get approved every year. Our auditor, for council's information, has not changed. It is still Myers Norris Penny, and they lay out what their plan is for how they will deal with the 2017 fiscal year for our city. And so, as a reminder, the materiality number, which is a number which they investigate thoroughly beyond a certain number, and not to say that they don't look for differences under $600,000, but that is the establishment of a materiality number, and that's $600,000, which is remaining the same from previous years, so that hasn't changed. So we did already have interim procedures completed in December, and then we have the field team from Myers Norris Penny visiting the city here in March, and then we will have our final document in June, which is really not unlike a lot of other years. So basically, it is a recommendation of Finance Committee, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the 2017 audit service plan for Myers Norris Penny.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
The second item,
I just need to
Sorry?
recuse myself from the room.
okay. So the second item is the sale of 142 Wilkinson Crescent. Sorry, not that sale, but the property adjacent to that location. And while I would say that this is not any new information for council, because we have discussed this item already, it turns out that there has been some new information that has been brought forward or discussed at the administrative level this afternoon. And I would ask Nathan or Mr. Pito now to bring forward some information with regards to that.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Buds. In our final review of the documents, it noticed there was a disconnect between our property zoning, our internal property zoning maps, and the planning department's property zoning maps. And rather than have council vote on a motion with not all the information, we would ask that council consider deferring this to our next meeting, where we can review that information and provide all the updated information to council.
So just further to that is this new information, which we have to make sure it's accurate, may change this recommendation in terms of the requirements of the individuals involved in this transaction. Therefore, we want to make sure we get it right. And that's for the benefit, actually, probably of the owners that may not have to go through the additional work that is described here. So I'm going to move that we defer this item to our next scheduled meeting on February the 12th.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Wall. Any comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And that does conclude the my report for council.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. Just ask Councillor Dreger to come back in. We'll move into City Planning and Economic Development Committee. Councillor Dreger, please.
2 items on the agenda this evening, Your Worship. The first is the building report from the Planning District for November of 2017. This report was discussed in committee 2 weeks ago, and it's there for your perusal and information. The second item was also discussed in committee 2 weeks ago, and it's the adoption of the tourism brand, and we heard how successful the rollout of that brand was at the mixed curling doubles tournament that happened earlier in January. And there's a bit of background laid out there. I'm not sure if there's anything further to say about this that wasn't already discussed. This logo has been well received by the community as a whole, and also by other vested boards, and yeah, there's some advertising commitments that have been laid out as well. There will be 2 seasonal full-page ads plus 2 pages editorial in North Dakota's Turtle Mountain Travel Guide this coming season, and I'm sure that will lure a lot of people to our region as well. There's also some marketing efforts listed there. Administrative request is that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie formally adopt the Island on the Prairies brand as the region's platform for tourism. And in light of how successful it's already been, I would recommend that we do that.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Buds. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried.
And that's all for my committee.
Thank you, Councillor Dreger. Community Service Committee, Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Community Service Committee has nothing on the agenda tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Wall, the Waterworks Committee.
Waterworks Committee has nothing to report this evening, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Draycott, the Transportation Committee, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for transportation this evening in Council.
Thank you. Councillor Espy, Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Public Safety Committee has nothing to report.
Thank you. We have no deferred business. We do have one piece of new business, and that is an amendment to the PRED funding agreement board composition.
Thank you. So basically, we have an item here for approval, and that's to, as mentioned, to amend the agreement between the City, the RM, and Central Plains Incorporated operating as PRED, Portage Regional Economic Development. And so, again, this is not news to many of you in terms of what PRED does, but we did enter into a 5-year funding agreement with the RM back in 2015. And since then, there's been obviously several meetings between both councils, but more recently, there's been some discussion in terms of changing some of the representatives on that board. At one point in time, we did have the CAOs from both municipalities as ex officio members to that board. I sit on that board, and I can tell you that that is not something that those individuals have regularly attended, because PRED is not the same organization it was several years ago. So we've moved past that. And also the potential of adding some individuals to the board for representation from the community that are not elected officials. So that's what we're dealing with here tonight. On November the 16th, the PRED board approved the revision of the individual bylaw to include the ability to appoint, at their discretion, a non-elected official to the board. And at that same meeting, they actually moved to appoint Peggy May from Southport to that board. And then correspondingly, at a January 18th meeting, the PRED board decided to remove, as I mentioned, the RM, CAO, and city manager positions from the board as ex officio non-voting members. So in order to do those officially, we do have to change that funding agreement, and that is to amend a clause 6, which you can see clearly is dealing with those. So it is the recommendation of the committee, and I so move that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the amendment to the agreement with the RM of Portage la Prairie and Central Plains Incorporated operating as PRED to remove RM, CAO, and city manager as ex officio non-voting members and add a non-elected official as a voting member to the PRED board, and further to approve the appointment of Peggy May as said member.
Moved by Councillor Buds and seconded by Councillor Dreger. Any questions or comments on the motion?
I think I'd just like to add that Mrs. May's appointment to this board is not by chance. This is some consultation from stakeholders, and her name was vetted and brought forward by the Chamber of Commerce, I believe.
It was brought forward by the Chamber of Commerce, and the appointment is very, very timely given the focus on tourism. Ms. May brings a lot of expertise and connections through Travel Manitoba, and she'll be a real asset to the board, especially in the area of tourism. Okay, all those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. We have no old business, so we will adjourn council at 6:21 p.m. And we're going to move right into committee. And I'd just like to remind all of our visitors back there that committee is open to the public. It is open to the press. And we'll call committee to order at 6:22. 6:22 p.m. Start off with Finance Legislative Property Committees. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you. Hard to believe, but the first item is to talk about an election and set aside some proposed funding and how we are going to split some of the responsibilities, and that being with our normal party here, and that being the Portage School Division. So basically, we're here to approve that we would partner with them on a joint election. We can see that we're anticipating the election cost to be approximately $26,000. And there is a chart that breaks down kind of where those funds come from. And you can see that these are estimates based on our history of running these types of things with cost increases. And it is proposed that we split that cost 50-50 with the school division. So it is, well, sorry, I was going to recommend that, but we're in committee. So is there any questions related to this particular item before it goes to council on the 12th?
There's no change from previous elections. This is the same as they've been run.
There is a change or two. I'll let Mr. Pito fill us in.
Through your worship, to Councillor Dreger, the change that has happened, you'll notice the budget's actually lower than previous elections because we removed our traditional practice of enumeration. Door-to-door enumeration has been done in previous elections. However, they found that it wasn't particularly effective process, and to match what other municipalities have done, they're looking to work with our federal and provincial partners to amalgamate a voters list with our information to save that, what had traditionally been about $14,000 to process of enumeration, to save that cost for the municipality and the school division.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions on that item, I'll move to my second item. This is several attachments here. And basically, it's for council to give some direction at our next meeting and for discussion tonight on what options that we would like to see for the development of our southeast urban expansion strategy. And so, this is no stranger to council in terms of the area that we're talking about, and that is the future site of Broad Street Properties, as well as Portage Assisted Living, and then beyond that area. And so we did have a consulting firm that was contracted by the City of Portage la Prairie to prepare conceptual designs for expansion of that area and to design phase 1 civil engineering for roads, sewer, water, and land drainage. So basically your main infrastructure items for that area. And so we did involve stakeholders and, of course, city administration, and that there is 3 options for our consideration here. It should be noted that adding a road connection to Provincial Road 240 would add significant cost to all 3 options. So that's on the surface not included, but it should also be noted that it would be the lowest with option A. So it would cost more, and it's not included in this, but if you selected option A, it would be the lowest cost to add that. And it just so happens that that is the option A, that is being recommended and supported by both the administration and the consulting firm. Another consideration is the timeline and costs for Phase 1. Some assumptions had to be inserted into the plan just because of timeline, and so we know that there's some development going on there as early as the spring. And so this is, as best as we can provide council with some direction and some costing on this project. So again, we'll be voting on this at our next meeting, but tonight's the night for discussion on any questions you might have on the 3 options. As I know Kelly's been involved in this, Mr. Braden's been involved in this, sorry Kelly, and can speak to it if council has any questions. Any?
I guess I would pose the question, option A, which is what is the recommendation, is just for single-family dwellings aside from what has already been established as being developed earlier or later on this year. If we perchance have somebody come in that is proposing another multifamily establishment, is that an option even if we propose option A?
That is an option. This is not a plan of subdivision. This is just a concept plan. So until even in the future, you can make whatever changes you want till a plan of subdivision is registered.
But further to the councillor's question, the infrastructure that we'd be installing in these options would be suffice to handle that size of a facility versus just single family?
Yeah, we would be designing some capacity, excess capacity in there to handle some additional flows if the population is or the development is for a more dense population.
I think that covers off what you were trying to...
That is what I was looking for. Thank you.
I had a question around the, there is no second road out at this time. There is a mention of the costs there. Any concerns about the impact of having just one way in?
Well, at this time, the consultant has indicated that we do not need a second access to this area. However, there is provision to connect to PR 240 as shown, which is a relatively expensive option, and there's a second option to add another access point off of Angle Road at some point in the future. That would require the city acquiring some property between this development area and Angle Road to put in a road there.
So any comments from Chief Carpenter on any safety issues at this point in time?
I mean, it's not the best scenario, but I mean, it's all workable. Mr. Braden will keep the roads clear for us at all times, so we'll ensure that we'll get there.
Okay, well, that answers my question then. Councillor Dreger.
I was just wondering if we had taken into consideration any feedback that has been received from the citizens, particularly on 9th Street Southeast, just concerns about the amount of traffic that they will have to deal with.
Well, I believe the feedback really came from the stakeholder meetings that were held in September. So that's that included a number of people in the area, but not necessarily just citizens. There was I saw a list of them that were consulted by the consultants back in September.
Councillor Wall.
Councillor Wall?
I've had a couple of inquiries from residents of 9th Street Southeast concerned about traffic. There's a fair amount of traffic on that street now with access to the hospital, to the Rotary housing, to Lions Manor, to the clinic, and so on. And they're thinking, you know, if you put a couple hundred more people just down that little piece of road to the east, it's going to increase traffic quite drastically. I wonder if we've ever had any traffic counts in the area, or if we have any projections of what might happen with traffic.
I don't know if that was part of the consultant's report or...
We did not include traffic study as part of this conceptual plan.
Is that something that council would like to see?
Councillor Espy?
I think I would like to see that. This is, as Councillor Wall already said, it's a busy enough area just with the completion of the new clinic. Traffic has gone up considerably. Now you're asking 876 people to leave their house a couple of times a day with one access to that new neighborhood and travel down Dufferin Avenue, essentially, or 9th Street. And it is the only, there are no other options really presented here except for one access. We do have the cost of going to 240, but there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing in there to suggest any other accesses to this property?
Well, as I mentioned, there is a potential opportunity to have an access off of Angle Road up in the northeast corner of this development area, but the city doesn't own the property there right now. We'd have to negotiate with Agriculture Canada to acquire some property.
And wasn't there another concern from Department of Highways about people leaving Angle Road and entering the Trans-Canada?
I'm sure they would have some concern, yes.
You're referencing a few years ago, Councillor Espy.
That was 2010, I believe. Yeah.
So yeah, time flies.
They still haven't closed it.
So, at least from my chair, that's been a good discussion here, but this will be coming to council unless we instruct administration to provide us with some additional information. So, Mr. Braden, how involved is getting a little bit more information from the traffic to complement these options?
I think we could probably prepare some traffic generation figures to do a full traffic study. That's probably that's quite a bit more involved. If we want to look at intersection issues all around this area, I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that, but at this stage we haven't gone that far.
Would council feel comfortable in at least operations department supplying us with that information for next council meeting? Start there. Yep. Is that something that can be obtained by the 12th, Mr. Braden?
I think we can have some preliminary numbers by then, yep.
Thank you. Was there anything else to discuss on this item before we move along and bring it to council? So just to be clear, we're still going to present this report with the additional information on traffic flows that operations will be supplying to us. Again, it's not a full-fledged traffic study, but it is some traffic numbers for our consideration. Okay, and the other items I have is for your information. It is the fourth quarter report for corporate services and the fourth quarter report from the city manager's department. So lots of work that's being done in those areas, and I welcome council's questions if you have any in those departments. Hearing none, that does conclude my committee's report.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. Councillor Dreger, City Planning and Act Development Committee.
I just have one fourth quarter report, and I've asked Executive Director of PRED, Vern May, to give us that report this evening.
Short and sweet, it's a good news report in economic development. We're sitting in a very attractive position in terms of marketing, versus maybe a year ago when we could say there hasn't been any significant investment in Portage la Prairie in 15 years, but you could be it, to now saying we had close to $500 million in new investment this year, and you should come and find out why. So there are definitely some encouraging inquiries from people who have been sitting on land for some time and are now looking to exercise their option to develop that land, and hopefully we'll have some news on that very soon. Over the past quarter, we've dealt with 23 potential investments, both external and internal. Inquiries have come from across Canada, the United States, and Europe during this quarter. On the workforce development side, in the fourth quarter, we confirmed support for a workforce development program that is going to be rolled out this month at both Portage Collegiate and the Portage Learning and Literacy Center. And that will have a direct reach of 800 future workers during the 3-year pilot of the project. The next component aimed at business is going to get rolled out here very shortly in 2018. Marketing, a second issue of Hey Portage magazine has been published and well received. The submission deadlines for the third issue coming up in the spring are just around the corner. And we've redeveloped the Pred website to represent a more sophisticated presence to investors, and that is due to launch any day now. We're just putting the final touches on that. The tourism strategy has been moving along at a very good pace. Our first provincial ad appeared today in the Travel Manitoba Inspiration Guide. The final touches on the website for tourism are imminent, within hours. So by the end of the week, that website will be live. And we were able to continue our trend in the fourth quarter of no bad press for Pred. We didn't start out the first quarter of 2018 so awesome, but we've reset the clock, and we'll look to see a similar positive engagement of the community in 2018.
Is there any questions for Mr. May? I just have one question under your workforce development. Has this program been presented to the First Nations schools or West Park School, perhaps?
We definitely shared it with the economic development officers for Dakota Ojibwe Tribal Council, Long Plain, and Dakota Teepee. It was presented to West Park School, and they expressed interest, but they have not confirmed. In our financing, in our budget within Pred, we have capacity to expand the program to include those schools should they wish to.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councillor Dreger. Councillor Fraze, Community Services, please.
Thank you, Worship. Available for information are fourth quarter reports from all of those committees, both the ad hoc committees and some of the city departments that are directly involved in community activity. It just goes to show that there's a wide range of connection between city council, citizens committees, and the regular round of folks trying to make the city a more livable place. Just some of the highlights, if I could, from all of those reports. The youth councillor maintains a busy schedule trying to make and keep connections with young people, which is a great boost to their involvement in the city. Parks department keeps cleaning up after all of us and make sure the snow is cleaned up and the grass is cut. PCRC engages in a wide variety of community activities, as well as providing some grants for community beautification. The Heritage Committee is busy looking at ways to preserve some of our historical green spaces, buildings, people, and their current activity is putting up signage on the walking path on the Fisher, I believe it's Fisher Avenue, that has the new walking path. Public Art Committee is happy to have received permission to spend upward of $100,000 in some significant projects involving public art in the community in the next 4 years. The Park Committee is busy planning a water feature in the central park that they've designated. And Age Friendly is busy trying to maintain those services most needed by the senior citizens of our community. So quite a range there of strong community-driven activity to keep the city more livable. So thanks to all of them. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councillor Fraze. Waterworks Committee, Councillor Wall, please.
Yes, Your Worship, for your information, there are reports from the Water Pollution Control Facility, the Water Treatment Plant, and the Waterworks Department, and they're available for your review. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. For committee, we do have some information from Manitoba Hydro. They are requesting an easement agreement to enter into the city property located at the rear lane, which is legally closed, north of Stanley Street between 4th Street Northeast and Broadway North. The closed lane has the legal description there as well, so we will be looking at next council meeting to enter into that agreement with Manitoba Hydro. As well, I do have fourth quarter reports for both the engineering department and the transportation department. Luckily, we haven't had a lot of snow this year so far, which has allowed us to do some more tree trimming. So if there's any questions, I can hope to answer those.
No questions about the Emerald Ash Borer from anybody? Nope. Okay.
That's a scary bug.
Scary bug.
So that would conclude my report this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Draycott. Public Safety Committee, Councillor Espy, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to go a little bit out of order here. I'm going to start with the RCMP fourth quarter report. Now, in the top 5 measurables, I am pleased, despite all of the occurrences we've heard of lately, to report that in this quarter, compared with the same quarter of last year or the previous quarter, person crimes, property crimes, and mischief all showed a sharp downward trend. In attempted theft of motor vehicle, we've stayed about level, and break and enter, we've stayed about level. And I must commend the RCMP for the great job they've done with some extra enforcement and some very successful search warrants that they've executed over the past while. Now, if there are any questions about this particular report, I will entertain them now. Hearing none, I will pass this over to our Director of Public Safety, Phil Carpenter, to present the fourth quarter for fire, bylaw enforcement, and the year-end stats for the fire department.
So I'll speak to the year-end stats for our fire department. This past year, our number of calls have been down a bit, which is good. Structure fires were down, about half as many as the year before. Grass fires were up a little bit. We have a drier spring. One thing that we have been working on is our false fire alarms, and they're down in numbers this past year, which it's paying off, we'll say, with the false fire alarm bylaw that we have incorporated about 3 years ago now, so the numbers are decreasing there. With the year-end report as well, we, as you know, purchased a new self-contained breathing apparatus, and which are working very well for our department. And we have a new fire department management program which we purchased and are in the final stages of implementing that, and which will improve things right from fire inspections to incident reporting to pre-plans and emergency plans, so it's going to benefit our department quite well. With the bylaw fourth quarter, it's kind of like a year-end report as well to some degree. Parking meters, financially wise, is a little bit above average. With our animal control, with the cats, our numbers are up a little bit more than, we'll say, the average that we are working on presently to maybe improve that in different ways and directions we can go with that. bylaw enforcement itself is working quite well. We have a newer staff that has started this past year, that they're all fairly new in their jobs, and they're, I would say, improving quite dramatically from the first part of the year, and taking over that portfolio this past year myself. It's been a learning curve, but I think we're moving along nicely. That's it.
Just one question for Chief Carpenter. So our bylaw works with, or the pound works with PAWS to find homes for the animals. So if anybody needed a cat, this would be a good time to be able to adopt a good cat from PAWS, right?
That's correct.
Okay, we'll quote you on that. Okay.
And that concludes the report for the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Espy. We now have question period, so I see a visitor in the gallery. If he'd like to come up to the podium, and you can ask Council any question you want, especially Councillor Budds or Councillor Espy.
No questions for tonight.
Because this will be the first time we've never had a question during question period. Okay?
I don't think that's...
You're sure?
I'm sure.
Going once? Okay, then committee is adjourned at 6:46 p.m. Thank you for coming out, everybody. It is a nice jacket. I think I probably should, or I should share it around. Everybody gets a turn wearing it. Hey?